Hello, everyone. Welcome back into the LFC Transfer Room YouTube channel. I'm Jack, delighted to be alongside Rigo here this afternoon. We said before anybody kind of got on Rigo, heading into Christmas, it would have been lovely to have a win off of the Liverpool versus Manchester City match in the Carabao Cup to lead us in. But I guess Liverpool aside, how are you doing at the moment, my friend?
Doing well. Down here in Florida, visiting my in-laws. So surrounded by family and looking forward to enjoying the holiday. Definitely. How about you, Jack?
We do not have the weather of Florida. It's for those in the UK to offer some reference point, -5 Fahrenheit, -20 Celsius. So it's a tad cold. I'm in my basement right now, so it's like I'm not braving the elements in this moment, but it's
Yeah, just careful you don't get buried under snow there and can't get out. But
that's the key. To avoid the outdoors for the foreseeable future. Stream discussion, I guess, related to America, not necessarily the weather and the climate, but about Liverpool's owners, Fenway Sports Group, and general ownership by Americans of European, specifically English football clubs. I think we'll talk first of all, though, about the match yesterday. Um, it was nice, I think, at first seeing Liverpool take the pitch again, but then almost the idea of them playing and the reality kind of set in. Um, there are some, disappointing moments in that match from yesterday. Obviously, the 3-2 defeat. I guess Rigo, just first of all, your kind of overall thoughts and just what you enjoyed, didn't enjoy about the match yesterday.
well, firstly, just echoing your point, definitely enjoyed seeing the Reds back out on the pitch, but then quickly reminded of how short we are in certain facets currently, either by injury or just not players not up to it at the moment. Unfortunately, yes, we did bow out of the Carabao Cup, so that title defense is kaput. And unfortunately, again, to our biggest rival, Manchester City. So that's a little bit more salt on the wound. What hurt most was just the defensive lapses that we kind of had. Unfortunately, I think they could have done a much better job just being more aware and not conceding those type of goals. But Kevin De Bruyne obviously came back in and enjoying his a great season with Holland as well. And, coming off his disappointing run with the Belgium squad, is back in a more comfortable situation in the Manchester City locker room. So he was out to prove a point. Well, what were your thoughts there on the match there?
I mean, I was surprised by the players that were selected. You had guys like Virgil, Allison makes sense, I think, in terms of resting. Trent, I think a little bit less so. Fabinho, we can dig into the Stefan Bajcetic versus Fabinho defensive mid discussion a little bit later. Look, it was typical Liverpool, wasn't it? I mean, played through in the midfield at times, moments of brilliance. Darwin Nunez chaos ball, as always. I think that the general sentiment is beginning to turn on him from, all right, it's fun seeing how insane he is on the pitch, to can you please hit the target when you're shooting at least? He had some bad misses yesterday. Also, hello, everybody tuning into the stream. Going to be all sorts of discussion, so feel free to pose questions, get involved in the discussion in the comments. For Rigo, I guess for you, kind of just on the players who didn't play, I guess, did the lineup surprise you in terms of the personnel that Klopp put out with the amount of rest just a few days after the World Cup final?
Definitely, most surprisingly, was James Milner at right back. At this point, I would have thought Calvin Ramsey would be good enough to start taking his place as Trent's backup. As we found out, I believe, after the match, Trent was ill. Unfortunately, I think there's a virus going on in the locker room. So his non-selection, that was surprising to begin with, but was explained with that. But I would have expected Calvin Ramsey to start. And then Milner obviously coming up lame and having to be substituted off for Nat Phillips, who, on a bright note, did prove once again that he is a Premier League player and deserves more time, if not with Liverpool, then with another squad. When he comes in, he always does his best and gets ahead on everything. And he did a really good job with Haaland. Disappointed with Gomez overall. We share a last name, and he didn't. He's gonna get some side eye at the Christmas dinner. But with the team selection, I thought Bajcetic unfortunately felt a little bit out of his depth. I don't know, perhaps with the other two that were pairing with him, and Elliot and Thiago didn't have enough muscle there to kind of help him quell that midfield of Man City with De Bruyne and Rodri. I also felt we were shortchanged on some of the calls yesterday. Rodri should have gotten booked in the first half and should have gotten sent off in the second half. And De Bruyne as well should have gotten booked on the foul that, but Stetches did get booked with a yellow. So the referee was absolutely atrocious overall, just by my eyes, and then checking the Twitter comments as well. But on some bright notes, as a bright note, I think answering the call when we did go down 1-0, 2-1 to tie the match, I think that was good. But unfortunately, again, we fell short, and a few defensive miscues there led us to our defeat.
Yeah, there definitely were some weird ones. I know there was a lot of love for Bajcetic and kind of his youth minutes, that what he had in the preseason, and there was some, I think, a big clamor to kind of see him challenge Fabinho for minutes. It was put in the deep end, to say the least, against a midfield of City's quality. I was team, I think he could be very good, but a bit premature. Like, he's just young. He's really needs a lot of time to mature as an individual, physically, as a player. So it was tough to put him out there. And for me, I mean, yeah, he was bad. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and be like, yeah, I mean, it was okay. It was whatever. But I struggle to see the vantage point of people who I think supported to see him play a bit more, and after that performance are saying shouldn't even get close to the side for Villa. He should be staying away from the 11. I mean, what did you expect? Is he even 18 or is he still 17?
I believe he's still 18. Born in Vigo, which is in the Galician region where my mother is from. So I have that connection there. And
you have connection to every player. Gomez, the region of Bajcetic.
Hey, like Pitbull, Mr. Worldwide here. But yeah, unfortunately, he didn't put in a good performance. I felt he was off. Overall rating 5.8. Only attempted 12 passes, connecting on 9 of those, and you need a little bit more action from that midfield. I felt it was pretty non-existent. Even from Thiago didn't have his best match by far either. So I felt there was that real disconnect between the defense and the midfield. It felt like we couldn't really handle their press. And, the crying need that we've been kind of saying since the beginning of the season as far as a midfielder is just consistently comes to light in some of these matches. I feel like a ball-carrying mid would definitely help us out a lot more than what we have currently. And unfortunately, we just didn't have the tools to kind of handle them yesterday.
I want to double back. Jen, thank you very much for the £8.99. Really appreciate it. Now Liverpool's back, hoping to bring the streams back in a lot more earnest. If not daily, where we had kind of over the summer. January, I think, is going to be big. We're aiming for very frequent content in January. So if you're new, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Notifications on for streams and for videos. But Jen, thank you very much as always. I think this match, though, kind of did bring me back down to earth after watching the World Cup, having a month and a half to not think about Liverpool, and kind of forget the many problems that exist at the moment. There's big gaps in the squad. And I think we can kind of segue this as we start kind of small with City. We can talk about a January transfer window, and then even bigger, we kind of cap the stream off with ownership debates. I think I want to pose this from Michael. For January, based on what you saw in this match, the front three had its problems, but it's got to be a midfielder that's needed in January, isn't it?
Wow. At this point, you kind of trying to weigh in just because of the nature of the injuries that Diaz and Jota have. You can obviously see in the starting lineup, and even now coming off the bench, we're at a loss for options, unfortunately, having to start Fabio Carvalho up on the left. With Firmino going down with a calf injury earlier in the week. So at this point, obviously we know we need a midfielder, but to kind of get this through these next 2 months, I think we need both. And who knows if we're going to have the funds to do so, or even the desire to do so with the ownership situation in flux. But yeah, I think we were short on attacking threat yesterday. And, as you pointed out earlier, Nunez did have his chances, and he's doing his best to create chances and put himself in position. But that defining, that last key moment, besides the pass to Salah to set him up for the goal, I think was missing heavily yesterday. But to answer your question, I still think we're crying out for a midfielder. If we have someone with legs who is a little bit more competent, and confident with the ball and assist, who we currently have, I think that would open up things up for the attacking third.
I think the big thing that I find interesting for this January window is what the rumors are that Liverpool are interested in Enzo Fernandez after his Young Player of the Tournament award winning tournament in the World Cup. He was brilliant as part of that Argentina side that won the World Cup. And Jude Bellingham, which Jen in the comments has been a big proponent of for, I think, the last 12 months since he was born, basically. He's almost got the promised child for Liverpool to sign in the midfield. Both of those guys would be huge. And if you splashed on both of them, it's an Alisson and Van Dijk-esque rebuild in the middle of the park. And those two can play in a variety of positions. Enzo, I don't think, could be a great lone defensive mid, but he could really – you'd have options galore. You'd have unbelievable options in a pivot. You could play them with Thiago. You could just rotate them. It would be spending £200 million plus, but it would be revolutionized. You'd go from a team that's kind of almost turgid and it's just two signings, boom, it explodes into a team that's, I think, got a lot of potential to do a lot more. The issue, though, is that I don't think either of them could be signed in January. So I think, Rigo, for you, in this dream scenario of Bellingham and Fernandez for £200 million, there's no money elsewhere to spend in January. Is it okay to almost write off the rest of the season? Champions League is no guarantee. You're locking in those two guys, but the next 6 months are kind of tough to watch. Are you taking that trade-off of your midfield revolution, but the rest of the season's kind of a tough watch?
So you're saying hold our chips till the summer?
Yes, for Bellingham and Fernandez. They're almost signed. So they're signed now, basically, for the summer. So it's not like there's a question mark, but you're still having to sacrifice the rest of the season.
If you could tell me we're finished top four, I'll take that. Just for the simple fact that I think going into next season, it'll be just a way more talented squad. And our midfield, at least for 2 of the 3, would be set for the next 10 years, with Enzo being 21 and Jude still being 19. The cost of that, $200 million. As we've heard rumored, Liverpool had I believe, 97 million euro offer rejected outright by Benfica. And if that's being the case, another big club sniffing around Enzo, I think at this point, why not just bite the bullet, play the rescission clause of 120 million euros, 105 million pounds, and just bring him in January. At that point, we'd just be negotiating with the player, not necessarily with the club. Remove some of that drama there and bring him in January, where we actually need him and I wouldn't say guarantee us top 4, but at least get us on the right foot to finishing top 4 and perhaps making a deep run into the Champions League.
100%. I think that Elias, and you make a good point that you have to bite the bullet 100% in paying, I think, an extra £20 million for that release clause. 105 million pounds is a lot of cash. It's a lot of money. And then you want to also sign Jude Bellingham. Well, then Man City almost have a leg up in that race because they have no financial hurdles to get past. They can offer the player a bit more money potentially. So then you have to almost maybe not get that guy you've been aiming for a while. That'd be surprising to me if that happened. I would welcome it with open arms. But it'd be tough because Enzo would come into a midfield and he doesn't replace Fabinho. He kind of replaces Henderson probably as that right-sided 8. Your best midfield is probably Thiago, Enzo, Fabinho. Does that solve the issue of Fabinho kind of being past it physically? I don't think it does. He struggled yesterday when he came on. He wasn't able to impose himself onto the match because he's just been physically worn out over the last 12 to 18 months. I said before the year that he was the most replaceable option. But again, another Elias comment I want to pull up. I find myself gravitating towards this. I've seen FSG now for a decade nearly, if not more than a decade, as owners of Liverpool. Are they going to go from very tight with the spending to 2 players who cost 9 figures each? I just don't see that happen. I don't see that happening. So I think it's a one or the other case. And if Fernandez can come in January and Jude Bellingham can come in the summer, you might be taking Fernandez just for that extra 6 months you can get because you need to salvage the season. Because people may play it down that you could still sign Jude Bellingham without the Champions League. I think you're being very naive that Liverpool's owners are going to see no Champions League revenue and also spend and promote the money needed to sign those two guys. So it's a weird one. But I'll actually open it up to a broader thing. What is your preferred players? What is your preferred moves timing wise for you, Rio? Because I may not be in the boat of signing either Enzo or Jude. This team, I think, needs a lot more signings, but I'll let you kind of give your take on what needs to happen in January and the summer to kind of revolutionize Liverpool.
Well, first off, I would actually just go right ahead and just make the move for Enzo. I don't think his price is going to go down. Unfortunately, it's just going to be more suitors in the summer than possibly in January. And if we're able to bring him in January, by all means, do it now, just because we need his assistance currently. We can't just plan for the summer and just throw the season down out in the waste bin. And I also think it would just make it more attractive for Jude to move over in the summer, just because he knows he has another young body in the midfield to partner up with, who he did see on display in the World Cup while he was there, putting in performances and winning that Young Player of the Tournament award. So it just makes it more attractive for Jude. And then if FSG is planning on selling, as rumored, it makes it more attractive to the potential buyer as well. When you're looking to sell your home, you try to make things as beautiful as possible, perhaps add in a couple of renovations to tack in that extra, thousands of dollars on the purchase price. And I think the same should be applied here with this club. And the additional outlay that FSG might do initially, and again, a lot of times they do structured payments, so they're not actually paying the entire freight up front, but more in segmented payoffs. I think that would possibly allow them to tack it onto the price and then recoup it later on. You want to sell this club on a good note and not potentially as a sinking ship with an aging squad and falling out of the Champions League spot. So I think it would be a wise investment if they want to continue being owners of Liverpool, or if they want to sell the club to make moves in January.
Yeah, 100% makes sense there. I guess generally, so there were the reports over the World Cup, 100% agree with Steven, that he would bring a dog back in the midfield that Liverpool's kind of lacked physically. It always stunned me that a team that predicated itself on pressing and physicality and just having that edge allowed their team to go, these players aren't old. Like, they're late 30s, early 30s. And like Fabinho, Milner's obviously getting very on in age. Henderson, Firmino, Salah, Van Dijk, Alisson are all, Matip as well, are all getting, up there in age. Thiago as well. I'm just naming a bunch of these guys. They're not old, but they have a shorter lifespan in a Klopp system, having to run so much. So they need to be replaced at a higher clip. We should be having more turnover than even City do, because we should be bringing in young legs, making them very old legs within 2 seasons because of how much they're running around, and then moving them on. It's not easy to do, and it takes a lot of heartlessness. That's been the biggest issue, is that Klopp hasn't been willing to look at Firmino, look at Divock Origi, Takumi Minamino, and a year before they should have left, or a year before they actually left, said, your time to go is now. We need to get some new faces in and just keep it fresh. The money hasn't really been there to make it fresh. Bellingham and Enzo would make it really fresh. For me, though, if I'm being realistic, and say we're giving ourselves 200 million pounds, all right, and that's the budget for Enzo and Jude, that's a great pair of players you could sign. For me, though, I would rather see 5 or 6 guys have that money kind of spent on them. A backup for Fabinho, an extra forward or two. I think the center back situation is going to become a bigger issue sooner rather than later. Konate, I think, needs to step into that starting role. Both Matip and Gomez, I think, in an ideal world, could be moving on in the next 6 to 12 months. So you then need some money in the center back department. And then you also need to probably have a high price midfielder. So maybe not 5 to 6. Maybe it's one of Jude or Enzo, and then a few players kind of in the 20 to 30 million pound range sprinkled in around there. But it's really tough for me, because if you sign Enzo and Jude, you're a little light up front in terms of players who have great no injury issues, because with Firmino is getting injured, has a lot more injury issues. Carvalho is just young. Elliott, I think, is an okay option, but he's still, again, young. Jota and Diaz, how are they going to recover from their longer-term injuries? We're not sure just yet. Nunez, you're putting a lot of pressure on him, his young shoulders, and he's dealing with a lot of pressure, obviously, himself, missing a lot of chances. And then it's Salah, who has to work with not great options alongside him as he's in his prime. So for me, I would go one or the other on Jude or Enzo, and then try and fill some other gaps in the squad and just get some fresh faces. Like Naby Keita came on yesterday. I've been Naby Keita FC for the last since he came here, even in the absolute most deep valleys. I don't see him getting out of this one. He needs to be moving on. Firmino should be going. He's an okay option, but it's tough. So we've got kind of our takes on this current window. Let's expand it out to FSG in general. It's probably too simplistic to say FSG out, FSG in. I'm like, I don't really care what they do, like if they sell the club or not. Riga, for you, are you, where do you stand on the FSG scale of out and in?
I'm for FSG invest, not out, but invest. Like put money into the club, and help keep us up at the top. And I think that it's been lacking. I know they made big money purchases, Nunez just this summer, but again, we need a Nunez plus. It always feels like we get one thing, but then not the plus that we need to kind of, as you said, replenish some of those tired legs, or at least bring in competition to bring out the best of those players. If you have players who, if they look behind them, they only have a youth player that might be coming after their minutes, as opposed to someone who's on, close to world class or playing for their national team that they kind of have to be concerned with. I think there's some complacency there as well. And as you mentioned, the legs. Our midfield used to be that driving force to help get that ball back and put us in good offensive situations on the counter press. So, we're dealing with a defense that isn't in a low block, closing us off and getting some of those easy scoring transition chances. And that's been missing. And unfortunately, if we're not pressing the ball and getting it back quickly, then teams have the chance to pick us apart and take advantage of certain lapses, as we saw yesterday. So for me, I'm not so much FSG out. They've done a lot of good things with the club. They made plenty of missteps as well, just with the Super League talk last year. And obviously looking to furlough employees. And, there's been missteps, obviously. But for the most part, they've done a good job steering the club and letting Klopp lead and build his team. But unless they're willing to pony up, then I think they need to sell or at least garner more investment into the club to keep us on the right track.
100%. It's tough to imagine a similar track record of spending leading to success in the short term. And the biggest issue is you've got some brilliantly talented players in the prime of their career at the moment that you want to take advantage of. You got some players that I think with competition, with support around them, could take the next step, could take the next leap. But it's tough to imagine them kind of curbing that trend. I anticipate they will sell the club. I think that there's way too much, there's too much smoke. There's got to be a fire somewhere. There's got to be thoughts about selling this club. The question is, who would buy the club? And for years, we've talked about Manchester City and their ownership being able to spend money beyond their means and how it's kind of against the long-term health of the sport to have ownership groups capable of spending money for not immediate returns, but just getting incredible competitive advantages on the pitch. It's tough to kind of be very against that for so many years. And then I don't have, and to kind of touch on the title of this, of the stream, American owners versus Arab owners, European owners. There's no real, at least in my opinion, difference in terms of the ownership group from where they're from. It's just the sheer fact of if they have the kind of funds to be able to spend beyond the club's means, that's bad for the sport as a general principle. As a general principle across the sport. Selfishly, for Liverpool, would I love an owner who has got £4 billion to spend to buy Liverpool and then can go spend 200 million every window? I would love that. I mean, the LFC transfer room would be eating tremendously because we'd be signing 2 to 3 players every 6 months. And that is just content galore. So there's that aspect to it. But the reality is, if FSG is to sell Liverpool, someone has to buy the club for 4 billion or something around there, 3 to 4 billion pounds. So you need to have that kind of capital. And then if they're going to do what we want them to do, which is to invest in the club, invest in the transfer market, they then need to have the kind of cash sitting around to throw, not only now, making it a 3.5 million pound investment, 4.5 million pound investment. They need to do that every 12 months. And whoever has that kind of cash, it's a strong possibility that they're not the greatest people. Our FSG, were they the kindest people to get their riches? I'm sure they weren't. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, we're going from great owners, the most shiny examples of perfection, to dirty. Oil money is a common one that you use to describe that. You're going to have to sacrifice your principles if you want that, and the principles of the sport long term and its health. It's a weird spot to be in, but I don't know. I think it is a fact that they can't compete anymore, which is a really sad reality, because Rigo, they've made so many right moves over the last 5 to 6 years, and yet they can't compete because they don't have money to make mistakes. That's the biggest issue. Is we saw Darwin Nunez and Jack Grealish play for the match yesterday. Jack Grealish has been a flop for City. He's had virtually zero impact. They spent 9 figures on him. Doesn't matter. He can sit on their bench and they don't care because they have the kind of money to make that mistake again. And so I that's a big difference between City and us, is that they have money to burn. We don't.
Yeah. Just since you're on Naby Keita Island, our misstep in signing Naby and has kind of made us gun shy in going ahead and signing other midfield targets besides Thiago since 2017. So, they can definitely afford to make a mistake. Calvin Phillips, who they signed this past offseason, has not basically played any minutes for them by injury or, any other reason. So they can afford those mistakes. For Jack Grealish, they bought themselves an English mascot, got additional Instagram followers or social media followers, following on their accounts. But apart from that, he hasn't contributed that much on the pitch either. And with FSG, it's like, we have to make every dollar count. And as far as going back to your point on ownership, anyone who's operating on the level of that's bandied about for the price of these clubs, they didn't make their money, selling cookies on the corner to underprivileged kids. They made their money by being ruthless in one way or another. You don't get to that level without, stepping on people in certain respects, And unfortunately, we can't, either on the American side or if you're in the UK, we can't sit on our high horse in many respects on a lot of those. And unfortunately, that's just the way things are. We don't hold the moral high ground in a lot of facets, but there are certain facets that I don't think we should give into. And that obviously would be human rights abuses or things of that nature. So whoever does come in, I hope, if at all possible, they have as clean of a record as they can, and which would allow us as supporters to continue supporting the club in good conscience. But and obviously we want someone who can spend that cash and keep us competitive. So it's a really hard thing to kind of navigate, and the amount of people that can buy the club is certainly a short list. So let's see how it shakes out. But I certainly hope it's more of a clearer conscience owner that comes in, as opposed to us having perhaps Man City's ownership group or even PSG's ownership group, who we know isn't the cleanest either.
It's tough because it came up extensively with the Qatar World Cup because of the manner in which they earned that bid, with the corruption there, the differences of views on the LGBTQ community, just general rights and just principles between, Europe, America, and Qatar in specific in the Middle East. It's always going to bring up those questions of where do you draw that line in the sand? Where do you kind of make your moral high grounds, your moral stands? And a lot of people in their defense of the 2022 World Cup are saying, are these newspapers going to have these same headlines in 2026 when it's here in the United States? And the historic things as a country that we've done, the current things, the issues that exist, you'd hope that those discussions are capable of happening, but it's always a really weird one. It's a really, really weird one with drawing these, and we were talking before the stream, Rigo, about American, soccer players, American footballers who how do you get your best athletes to play this sport in specific? It's just, there are so many differences, so many, opens a Pandora's box of discussion points when you get into these things about, is this owner a good person or not? And then it's, well, is this owner a good person? What are your thoughts on this person? It's a weird spot to be in because, it's just different everywhere. And I would love to be able to just dig into comments like Elias's and feel like, all right, so this window, we don't care where the money comes from. Ignore where the money comes from. Let's talk about the players on the pitch. It's tough to do both, though. It's tough to not bring in those external factors. But speaking of this window, that would be a very good window. I'm not totally sold on Hakpo. I think he's too similar to Nunez in like that big, lanky, right-footed guy who likes to play on the left. I feel like you're just adding a guy who's not going to differentiate us too much. Kone's solid. I'm not heard of this Scalvini guy, so I'm not going to be casting judgment. I mean, Jude is obviously, he's an okay player. How are you going to call Naby Keita garbage, though? How are you going to call Naby Keita garbage? Breaks my heart a little bit there to see that. But I don't know. Your thoughts on this potential window, I guess, for you, Rigo?
That'd be outstanding to me. Gakpo, I think, as you mentioned, he's primarily the left, plays on the left, but he can play up front as well, and certainly has the talent to play on the right side as well. He buried it coming in from the right to the left. He buried a great goal for Holland in the World Cup. So he's a player on the rise, but I think he's probably set on going to Man United and joining up with ETH there. So kind of scratched him off. But as far as Manu Kone, I would love that signing. I think that's more of under the radar one that wouldn't break the bank and can provide a lot of those tools for that Enzo could perhaps provide to the club. And I think he would be certainly a welcome addition. And Scalvini, I don't know much of him. But as far as getting rid of the garbage, just by, not re-signing a lot of these players are going to leave in the summer, but that doesn't necessarily help us now in the here and now. We are going to see those players still play throughout the rest of the season. Keita, unfortunately, didn't have the career that we all expected of him at Liverpool. It is going to come to a sad end. Perhaps there are rumors of AC Milan perhaps trying to get him in January, but I highly doubt that. He'll probably just go on a Bosman deal to another club in Europe. I don't know if another Premier League club's going to sign him. I think he'll have better success in a more open league than he would in the Premier League in dealing with his injuries. So I wish him luck in his next venture, but I don't think we're going to see too much of him from here on out, unfortunately.
I want to make an argument.
As far as Jones, Jones catches so much heat from so many corners, and this is a Liverpool player, a Liverpool kid who's still young, still growing, has gone through some physical hurdles this season, unfortunately, and wasn't able to step into the opportunity that he was given with some of the injuries on the starters that we have, and that's unfortunate. I think now would have been his time to shine, and I think he would have added something in yesterday's match as far as ball carrying and ball retention that we were lacking yesterday. So it's unfortunate. I think he needs a loan move at this point, especially if we bring in some newer bodies into the midfield. But whatever we do, I think 2 players minimum is needed for January just to make sure that we finish top 4.
Yeah. I want to actually dig into the back end of this comment too. Keita, Ox, Milner, Jones having to go in Elias's estimation. I am your biggest Naby Keita fan. I'm not going to sit here and be like, he deserves more time. He should go. His Liverpool career should end. If not in January, it should end in the summer. Because I said at the beginning of the season, if there was ever a time for him to command a spot, it was when we had our little bit of injury issues at the beginning of the season. He had an opening to the team. couldn't take it because of injury. And it's sad. Is it his fault? Probably not. Maybe a little bit his fault. But you also have to be ruthless. Like, all right, you're injury prone. Doesn't mean we have to give you all this game time. Doesn't mean we have to keep you in. Oxlade-Chamberlain, same boat. Injuries ravaged him. Joe Gomez, injuries ravaged him. Where he always struggled positionally. He wasn't the greatest at reading the game, but his recovery and his speed was so unbelievable that it made up for any of those issues. And he was still a brilliant center back in the title-winning season and the 6 months after that during COVID. But the injuries continued to just eat away at him. His physicality. I don't think there's any mistakes made in the development of Joe Gomez. I think we actually did pretty decently. I think we had an okay spot with him. It was just unfortunate. But the hill I will die on with Naby Keita and Oxlade-Chamberlain is look at the profile of those two. And if they just hadn't had injuries ravage them, that's the perfect Klopp midfield too. That's your perfect pair of eights. Keita on the left, Oxlade-Chamberlain on the right. Because Oxlade-Chamberlain, look at his pre-assist, his pass to Nunez for the second goal yesterday. Has the ball on the touchline, 3 guys around him, managed to navigate it around one of them with a nice tight dribble, and then Trivelas it with the outside of his right foot down the touchline, perfectly weights it into the feet of Nunez, who then plays it in for Salah for the equalizer. He has that in his locker, but injuries have just decimated his physicality. So for Oxlade-Chamberlain and Naby Keita in an alternative universe, where I am thriving in my Naby Keita fan club, those 2 guys have been fit and they've been dominating the midfield for Liverpool. And same with Curtis Jones. I think he is a product of the injuries of Keita and Oxlade-Chamberlain, forcing him to be sitting as an option when he should have been on loan for another year or 2. So it's unfortunate, the injuries that have kind of plagued a few of these players, because I think if it's impossible to say, and I think it was naive of the club to expect all of these guys to maintain perfect injury records. But if no injuries befell any of the players, the major injuries befell any of the players, you're looking at, I think, a near-on perfect balance of the squad. But the issue is you didn't get that. They didn't react in time to move Oxlade-Chamberlain on, or Naby Keita on, or Roberto Firmino on. Or Curtis Jones to a certain extent, James Milner as well. Guys that should have been moved on earlier, but they weren't because of injury issues for them and for other players. So I have sympathy. It's not easy to be in FSG or Klopp's spot, but they haven't done it right in this spot. And it's unfortunate because I like all of them as individuals, but they needed to have gone 6 to 12 months ago.
Yeah, it's yeah, as you mentioned, you can't count on injuries, but you can kind of look at an injury record and kind of use that as a barometer of what to expect for the upcoming season. And with the history that they've displayed, even if Keita for the most part stayed whole last season and put in, a decent performance for the most part every time he did come in. If you look at all his stats, they are good stats. But again, I think me, along with a lot of Liverpool fans, weren't just confident whenever he was on the pitch or whenever he was named to the starting 11. And I think, our hope has kind of was dashed, and then making that recovery. I don't think a lot of fans were able to overcome that hurdle, or Keita wasn't able to overcome that hurdle with those fans to kind of garner their support and enthusiasm for his inclusion into the squad. And he doesn't seem happy here. Even when coming on, that hug with Klopp it doesn't seem like the hug that Klopp gives to other players. From what I've heard, they really can't stand each other at this point. And the rumors of us perhaps extending Keita still resurfacing. I think Neil Jones, reported on that they were still looking to perhaps extend them. I think to me, it's like, why? Like, at this point, it's just insanity. Just cut your losses. Wish them well. It didn't work out. Just like in dating somebody, you start off with the best intentions, but as you go along, you see their track record and injury history, and you don't want to sign them long term. And I think we saw that with Naby, and we just have to, cut the cord now and hope, we find a better match out there in that market.
Gary, I think how's Carvalho catching the strays? He scored against City. He was poor. Yeah, sure. A goal doesn't cover up not a great performance, but he's young. He scored against City.
Well, this leads to a bigger discussion. What is Liverpool's long-term vision of what the formations are going to be.
Yeah.
What our tactics are going to be, because I think certain players that are highly talented are being utilized in positions that don't suit them their best. You know, going back a couple of seasons, Curtis Jones. Curtis Jones wasn't being utilized in his best position, and now we're seeing that with Harvey Elliott and with Fabio Carvalho. Just because of the nature of our formation, they're being kind of wedged into either an 8 role, or yesterday for Fabio, playing on the left wing. I don't think he's speedy enough for that. I think he needs to be more in central attacking midfielder role, like he played for Fulham. As far as his physicality, he was physical enough to handle that in the championship last season. I think he's physical enough to handle certain aspects of the game, but you can't really count on him to chase down wingers and body them up and play defense like he was called on to do yesterday. He fouled a ton, and you can see he was kind of outmatched on the physical side. So, yes, he might need to put on a little bit more muscle, but his skill set, I don't think, is being utilized to his maximum capability just because of the position he's playing in. So I think a rethink on what we do moving forward might be in order, just like I don't think we necessarily need a lone sitting CDM moving forward if we're perhaps moving to a double pivot with a central attacking midfielder as far as part of the top of the triangle for midfield.
I think we had great success with, pushing Salah into a strike partnership and having someone out on the right. I think Carvalho I agree, as a 10, as a shadow striker, just off of the shoulder of a center forward. The issue is, do we have a great center forward for him to play off of? I'm not sure if that's Nunez's best spot. He's also a guy who almost is better off on the left a little bit, where he's kind of just not playing through the middle a ton. You saw where he got the assist, and he was constantly running into the channels. So it's a case of a lot of players being slightly out of their best spots. Some of it's down to injury. And I think I want to double on this comment from Adam. Trust Klopp, keeps players because they're useful. Fancy the hard work goes into the games Klopp does. I have no question that Naby Keita, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, Curtis Jones, James Milner all work their ass off in training. And they work really hard. They are great guys to be around. But the issue is, think about what you could have done with that position, with the money you could have gotten by selling them, for a guy who maybe could have produced. They haven't produced. Klopp trusted them. So is Klopp the one who's mistaken here? I mean, how often can you blame a player for not producing and not look at Klopp and say, why are you still trusting guys who struggle and have not performed at the heights that they should have? And you also have to ask yourself, what do you expect of Liverpool as a club? If we're just kind of waiting on Naby Keita and Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain to curb their injury issues and become a good option going forward, that it's not a title-winning mentality. It's maybe not the most loving Liverpool-esque vibe, but is Pep Guardiola going to sit around for 5 years? What will be if Naby Keita goes in the window? 5 years waiting for someone to produce? He wouldn't wait half a decade hoping someone can get something out of them. He would have cut his losses halfway through that, if not 2 years. So to me, it's just, you have to have one or the other. You either have to want to move towards just lower your expectations of what you expect as a club, or move away from this favoritism aspect. I'm more in the boat of more ruthlessness, but it's very easy for me to kind of look at that very coldly. Obviously, Klopp has to look these guys in the eyes, his friends, guys he's worked with intently, and say, we want to move you on. We want to go a different direction. That's not an easy discussion to have. But because Klopp hasn't done enough of those discussions, we're in the spot that we're in. So.
And that's where I'm kind of unsure. If some of the things being said in press conferences and is kind of what it actually is. He's made his comments more recently that he wishes he was able to take more risk and perhaps play a bit more in bringing in players in the transfer market. And I think having his hands tied has kind of forced him to hitch his boat to some of these players and hope for the best and hope they turn out and perform and stay healthy. And unfortunately, all those eggs, were in the same basket and all broke at the same time. And that's why we're kind of seeing what we have now, where we have four of our best players out, out long term or interspersed with injuries, and can't really count or rely on a full squad at the moment. We've been listing, three goalkeepers in the match day squad for I don't know how long, and how many defenders are in the squad, and no real attacking or midfield threat options to bring off the bench. And he's playing with the toys that he has at his disposal, and whether or not that's a product of FSG not putting in enough money, which we know it is, or him just being too loyal to players. I think that card perhaps is played a little bit too much, just because we've seen him move on from players before in the past, and and brought in new blood as well. Karius, just Loris Karius. He never played another match for Liverpool after that flounder in the Champions League. He didn't show too much emotion with him, even though he was a Liverpool player for a couple of seasons already. So I do think if we're going for excellence, and I think Klopp he does have that ruthlessness about him in certain respects, but when you kind of have to keep these players because you can't bring in players to supplant them, you kind of have to play nice and play the politics game and hug every single player to make them feel welcome, and try to get something out of them, because at a certain point, you're going to have to count on them, just because you don't have that many other options.
I want to also kind of building off that, and also with Adam, I don't mean to pick on Adam. I don't want this to be a personal thing with you in the slightest, but I want to pick on that last sentence. People will win for you if you stand with them. Has Keita, Oxlade, and Curtis Jones really won things for Liverpool? They've been part of a winning team, but remove Curtis from that. We'll focus on Keita and Oxlade, and I'm one of Keita's biggest fans. It's tough for me to look at valuing the trust Klopp has shown when it clearly hasn't paid off. It's why we're in the spot we're in. Because we haven't rotated as much. People say we should have invested more. You also only have 25 spots that you can use in a Premier League registration and Champions League registration. You can't just sign 5 more guys over the last 2 years and have them on top of what you already have. You would have had to move guys on. And who else would you have moved on beyond the 5 guys that Elias had mentioned earlier? Those are the guys who would have been moved on for signings. So it hasn't worked sitting around waiting. And we should have moved these guys on at this point. And I think it would be foolish not to learn from that. And the harsh reality is players got injured. Being injured is fine. You can't just get rid of somebody because they're injured. I agree with that part from Adam's comment. Like Jota and Diaz are injured right now. We're not going to get rid of them when they are back fit because they were injured. They're going to recover. But if they're never the same again after their injury, if Jota doesn't recover well from his calf injury, you have to balance trusting this guy and wanting the best for him individually, and recognizing that maybe when Jota comes back from this calf injury, what if he's not the same player? What if he lacks the explosiveness? What if his confidence is shot? What if all of those things that made him a great forward don't fully carry over and he's half the player he once was? Do you just hope that he recovers that eventually? It's not a terrible idea, but it's not a title winning. It's not how you win trophies year in, year out, by sitting and hoping. You are more proactive than that. It's not a fun thing to do because I love Jota. I love Diaz. But what if Diaz's explosiveness doesn't come back from this knee injury? What if he's not able to dribble with as much gusto? You got to have those tough discussions. And that's why they're paid big money to make those decisions, to be those players, because it's not an easy spot to be in. But we've seen injuries decimate players and us not be ruthless with them in the past. You got to be doing it going forward if you want something to change. I think that's where I'm at, Rio. But I think we've been going on for about 50 minutes, near around an hour here. I guess kind of just in the immediate short term, we've seen some discussions. Actually, let's dig into it for the Villa match on Boxing Day, on Monday, so 3 days from now. Any changes to 11 you want to see? Any players you want to see get some minutes? What are you hoping for in the Premier League play?
Yeah, I think we'll see immediate changes. Just Klopp alluding to it in the post game that he expects Virgil, Allison, and Trent to be ready for the Monday's match against Villa. So I think we can count on them to be back into the starting lineup. On the Villa side, Emi Martinez won't be there. There are some questions as far as who's going to be the goalkeeper for them, but I think us as fans, we have to, and I hope Liverpool as well, the players, they don't sleep on Aston Villa. Unai Emery is going to have them drilled at this point in the style he wants to play. He's a very, very good manager. And I think they did a great signing in bringing him in. So we need to definitely be prepared for Villa and stay awake as far as our defensive responsibilities, because they're going to be pitching that ball around. They scored some nice goals in the I was about to say preseason, but in the lead up into the kickoff to the second half of the season. I've caught a few of their highlights, and they put in some nice goals. So I think we need to stay on point, make sure we're not falling asleep defensively. And I think in the starting lineup, we'll see Virgil back, Matip there to partner with him, and we'll see Trent back at his right back spot. Midfield is more of a concern, but hopefully Fabinho can step back into the starting role. And I think we'll probably see Thiago and Elliott rounding that out. And attacking wise, we'll probably stick with the same Carvalho, Nunez to partner up with Salah, because Firmino's going to be out for a few matches. Muller's going to be out for a few matches. So I think those will be the changes we'll see. What do you expect for Monday?
I think not as much as others. I think Bajcetic won't maintain his spot. I think Fabinho might come back into the 11. I think Henderson will probably come back into the 11 as well. I think it's going to be, I think the front three should stay the same, more or less. I hope it changes its shape. I hope that it's almost a diamond with Carvalho, the deepest of the front three, not quite a false nine, with Nunez and Salah a bit more central. Is Trent going to be back for Monday with the illness, Rigo? I hadn't seen the illness actually for yesterday. Is he going to be back to your knowledge?
I think they're expecting him back for Monday. I think he was just a scratch yesterday just because he wasn't recovered enough for the illness, but he should be back on Monday.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, yeah. And actually, before we end, Cartier, I'm seeing the comment now, and so I went and looked on Twitter. So not like breaking news, but I think Rigo will close the stream on actually some more negative stuff. So scrolling now is from Dave OCKOP. I don't know how to pronounce the last part of his name. United are overtaking Liverpool in the race to sign Enzo Fernandez. They're willing to pay his release clause to avoid any competition. That's just something came across about 20 minutes ago. Nothing done. It's just they're willing, I guess, to jump ahead in the race, which it's great news. Exactly how I wanted to end the stream with United.
Well, to be quite honest, actually, it could be taken as great news because it simplifies things. Pay the release clause, get the player. That's just simple. There's not going to be negotiating. Oh, we'll go to 101. We'll go to 102, et cetera, et cetera. Pay it, be done with it, bring in the player, and march on for a top four finish.
Mm-hmm. It does simplify things. It's either you watch him go to your bitter rivals, or you cough up 120 million euros. That's a crazy amount of money to think about. 120 million euros, but look, I mean,
but is it these guys are dealing in billions? I mean, like they're trying to buy an NBA club for $4 billion. Like if you want to sell off Liverpool, invest into it, and then just tack it onto the sticker price at the end.
Yeah, no, it's.
Before we close out, I wanted to ask you, what would be your one Christmas wish to open up, not Sunday, but open up January 1st in the form of a transfer? One Christmas wish.
One Christmas wish. So, okay, here's the thing. It's with Enzo, he's not like it was the World Cup brought him out of from nowhere to stardom. But I have my slight reservations. The dream, I think the dream is honestly, Madison's a great shout. I think it's a bigger thing than just. So it just have to be a transfer, or can it be more general Liverpool related for your?
It could be FSG out and they sold the club.
That's
that's where your brain's going.
That's where my brain is going. Is the new year, fiscal year ends, and they say, you know what, Steve Ballmer. I love his energy. Guy was part of one of the founders of Microsoft. He is a crazy dude. I imagine him, if he walks in with Liverpool, he'd just be going absolutely insane. If he buys them on, doesn't have to be Steve Ballmer specifically, but some high energy owner who is really into it, decides to buy the club. That'd be my really ambitious Christmas wish. Rigo, for you, what is Jen is really asking for a lot. Santa's like, all right, Jen, I don't have this kind of cash. Rigo, what's your Christmas wish?
Apart from FSG selling, removing that off the table, I'll go right ahead and say bring in Enzo and just be done with it. Pay the release clause and bring him in. Ride that wave that he's currently on. He's not going to get more popular or in the spotlight than he currently is. Going back to Benfica, there's not that many eyes on the Portuguese league as there are on the Premier League, obviously. And, Argentina fans all over the world will just, start rooting for the Liverpool Reds if we were to bring him in. So I think he'd solve a couple of issues, positional versatility, as well as legs and tremendous passing to create those chances and simplify things for Darwin Nunez. Up the pitch. I think Darwin, when he has too much time, he just starts too many gears start moving. I think we just need to simplify things for him. If he's played a central role and we just ask him to kick the ball into the net and not think about it too much, I think he'd be much better off.
He is the kind of guy who his I shouldn't cast too many stones, but his footballing IQ is not very high. He's just like a pure reflexes instinct kind of forward. So again, just less time for him to think, the better for all involved.
To me, it might not be so much IQ. I just think he's just too Spanish word is thought, but he's just too hard on the ball. So everything is like there's no touch. He's not a delicate player. So if you give him too much time, there's just something's gonna happen. So I just think he just needs to grip it and rip it, as they say, He just needs to rip it and rip it into the net.
100%. Chedu asking if Ronaldo Nazario or Darwin Nunez is the Ronaldo Nazario of our generation. I'm going to leave that thought for you to answer the general audience. I'm not going to answer that for you as we close out our stream here today. It was a fun one. Covered a range of topics. But it was a pleasure to be alongside Rigo here today. Whether you celebrate Christmas or one of the many other holidays in this holiday festive season, I hope you are safe. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful break. And hopefully Liverpool decide to make it a nice holiday season as well with some victories as they return to Premier League play. But for Rigo, I've been Jack. This has been the LFC Transfer Room. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and we will catch you in our next stream or video.